So we ready? Hi everyone, thanks for coming. Sorry I lost my voice. It's a little strange to hear me. I really appreciate you coming to this session. This session is a presentation of current research that's being done in the psychology department. And these presentations are original research that's been conducted by students, undergraduate students like you guys, in either our research methods course or our advanced experimental psychology course. So it's really impressive that these students have come up with the research idea, collected the data, done the data analysis, written up the final product, and then presented the final product. All of these presentations either have already or will next year be presented at a scientific conference, probably the Southeastern Psychological Association conference. The last two have already been presented, and this one probably will go next year. I think it's really impressive that these students are doing work that is acknowledged to be at a level high enough that the scientific community thinks it's worthy of presentation. It's not an undergraduate conference, it's a scientific conference for faculty, graduate students primarily. So undergraduates sometimes sneak in. We're going to start with Jessica Udry, Katie Moody, and McKenna Bonarenko. We're going to be talking about intelligence, reading fluency, textism, decoding proficiency, and cell phone use, and how all that relates to reading comprehension.
All right. So as Dr. Zimmer said, we are from the research methods class. If you're unfamiliar with our psychology program, all psychology students and biopsychology students are required to take a research methods class. And in this class, we conduct two different studies, one correlational and one experimental. So we are presenting the correlational study that was conducted last semester. And it looked at intelligence, reading fluency, textism decoding, and cell phone use, predicting reading comprehension. So the reason behind this study is people are using different mediums to read. Previously we didn't have, technology, and people were reading mainly in books and newspapers. But now in 2013, the average adult spent approximately 2.5 hours on mobile devices compared to only half an hour in 2010. So clearly we are reading more on our mobile devices, we're texting more, we're doing things that aren't traditional. So people wondered, well, what is this doing to people who are learning to read? When we use electronic devices, often we don't write everything out. You're trying to say a long message in 160 characters. So you want to shorten as much as possible. So we use textisms instead. And, people wondered, is this a good or a bad thing? Are we inhibiting children's learning? Are we making ourselves less intelligent by using all these textisms rather than writing out words? So if you were wondering, like all of us in research methods were, well, what is a textism? I have some examples here you're probably familiar with. The first one, does anyone want to tell me what this means? Yeah, good job. All right, what about this?
Oh my God.
All right. What about this? Yep, talk to you later.
I know them all.
Oh, yeah. See, there we go. All right, and one last one. Okay, so it seems like most people in this room are really familiar with these words, so a lot of people are concerned, will people not know how to spell see you later because we're only using this? Everyone knows these things. Are we going to know how to spell it out? Is this harming us? So one of the first people to investigate into this area were Plesterwood and Bell in 2008. They looked at 11 and 10-year-old children, and they administered a spelling test, and they obtained writing scores from a standardized test that they took at the school, and then they gave them a textism translating task. This task had two parts. In the first part, children were given a sentence, and they asked them to translate it into as many textisms as possible. And then in the second part, they were given a sentence in textisms and asked to translate it into standard English. And what they found was that the higher children scored on the textism test, the higher their scores were on the writing assessment. And this proved to be a bit strange. A lot of people generally assume that if you were texting more and familiar with textisms, that you would be scoring lower on writing assessments. So this was, contrary to what people had assumed. So Hopworth and Moon in 2012 investigated further into this area. They looked at children from ages 9 to 13, and they looked at the total cell phone usage, and then they further broke that down into the time spent texting and time spent talking. And then they looked at how all these factors influenced reading comprehension. And what they found was that the total time children were spending on the phone, talking, texting, playing games, whatever, was negatively correlated with reading comprehension, meaning that the more time children were spending on phones, the lower their reading comprehension scores were. However, if we only look at the textism time, or the texting time, we saw that there was a positive correlation. That meant that the more time children spent texting, the higher their reading comprehension scores would be. This is a very interesting finding, and it might suggest that maybe there's something about texting, breaking things down and looking at these little coded messages and breaking them down might actually help reading comprehension. This is important to remember later when we look at our results, that perhaps it's not necessarily, texting and familiarity with textisms that is related to reading comprehension, but perhaps it's just decoding, and people are getting practice decoding using textisms. All right, so textisms were not the only factor we were looking at. We were looking at several different factors of reading comprehension. So Macaruso and Shankweiler in 2010 looked at community college students ages 18 to 37, and they looked at many factors relating to reading comprehension, including listening comprehension, decoding, phonological awareness, reading fluency, and several others. And what they found is that when they controlled for listening comprehension and decoding, reading fluency was the only factor to have a significant relationship with reading comprehension. This implies that it's a very important part, even with some other previously established factors were accounted for, reading fluency was still a very significant part of reading comprehension. This was further affirmed by Mellor, Fall, and Mark in 2009. This study looked at low literacy adults. These adults were enrolled in a learning program and were broken down into different levels based upon their skill at reading comprehension. They were tested on phonemic decoding, word identification, word attack, sight words, silent word, and fluency. And what they found is that the higher skill level these people were enrolled in, the higher their reading fluency and phonemic decoding scores were. Now, this decoding is not necessarily the same decoding we're looking at, but this might further emphasize the fact that perhaps it's not a familiarity with textism that is related to reading comprehension, but maybe it's just, these people are good at decoding in general, and that's related to reading comprehension. So the current study we looked at addressed two questions, the first of which was related to textisms and whether the findings of the first two studies could be found in a college-aged audience. And we hypothesized that textism decoding would be positively correlated with reading comprehension as seen in the studies of children. Our second question was which of IQ, reading fluency, and reading, what was the last one? What did I say? Okay.
Textism decoding.
Textism decoding, the important one. All right. Which of those would be have the strongest relationship with reading comprehension? And we predicted that reading fluency would have the strongest predicting factor of reading comprehension.
Alrighty, so the participants in this study were Oglethorpe students ages 18 through 23. We had 109 females and 51 males, and then the ethnicity of them were white, black, Hispanic or Latino, Asian or Pacific Islander, other or biracial. They were recruited through emails sent by the psych department or by word of mouth of the experimenter, and they received 1 point of extra credit in all their psych classes. So after participants signed the consent form, the first task they did was a textism decoding task. And what this task was, they received a list of textisms, and they were asked to translate them back into standard English. So I have some examples for you. Does anybody know what any of these mean? We didn't either. All right. So the first one, code 9, is AKA parents in the room. The second one is let's have online sex for you parents. CWOT is complete waste of time. And then the last one is I'll be late. I'm surprised I didn't get that one. Okay. So the second task was a reading fluency subtest, where participants received a list of 99 statements, and they had to answer yes or no according to the statement, and they had 3 minutes to complete this task. And here are some examples of those statements. Okay, a cow is an animal. Yes. A fish lives on land. No. Good job. The moon is in the sky. No. And then an apple is blue. The next task they had to do was a Wonderlic test, which is an IQ test. And they had 4 minutes to complete this task, and there were 16 questions. So some of the examples is paper sells for 21 cents per pad. How much will 4 pads cost? And another one is the 9th month of the year is. Good job. There were harder ones, but they were more complicated. So the next task was a reading comprehension task. There were actually 2 sections of this task. The first section was a paragraph task where they would read a paragraph and then answer 4 questions about the paragraph, and there were 3 of those. And then the second task was a fill-in-the-blank task where they had 10 sentences that were missing a word, and they had to put the word that appropriately went there. So an example of one from the paragraph task is, in the first sentence, what does treading lightly mean? And here's the first sentence. And there's the answer. Ah, okay. Sorry. Okay, sorry. But yeah. So they were not easy. Only when looking up at the sky did Pierce cease to feel how sordid and humiliating were all mundane things blank with the wonders of the universe. You took the class.
Okay. So for each individual test administered, a Pearson correlation analysis was conducted in order to find the correlation between all tests. Results showed that the paragraph section had a moderate positive correlation with the reading fluency section. The fill-in-the-blank section of the reading comprehension task had a small positive correlation with the reading fluency task. What's interesting here is that both sections of the reading comprehension task had a small positive correlation. Now this is strange since both tasks are measuring reading comprehension. It would be expected that there would be a strong positive correlation instead of a small positive correlation. And we'll see the effects of this later on in our results. 2 multiple regression analyses were conducted in order to find the best predictor for reading comprehension. A multiple regression analysis looks at predictor variables and tries to find the most significant one for an outcome measure. For the purpose of our experiment, we had 4 predictor variables. Our predictor variables included number of texts sent per day, total number correct on the textism decoding task, total number correct on the Wonderlic task, and total number correct on the reading fluency task. The most important numbers to pay attention to here are these here listed under p-value. The p-value tells you your level of significance, or your probability of making a type 1 error. A type 1 error means that you have said there is significance when there is none, and this is bad. Therefore, we want this number to be low. More specifically, we want this number to be below 0.05. Looking down, the only number that is below 0.05 is for the reading fluency task. Here, the number is 0.001. This means that there was a 0.1% chance that we made a type 1 error. Therefore, for the paragraph section of the reading comprehension task, reading fluency was the only significant predictor of reading comprehension. The second multiple regression analysis was for the fill-in-the-blank section of the reading comprehension task. All predictor variables were the same, however, the significance of them was different. Here we have 3 significant predictors: the number of texts sent per day, total number correct on the textism decoding task, and again, with the same as the paragraph section, we have reading fluency also as a significant predictor. What's interesting here is the standardized beta for number of texts sent per day and the textism decoding task. For the textism decoding task, we have for the number of texts per day, we have a negative standardized beta. This means that as number of texts per day increased, scores on the reading comprehension task decreased. However, for the textism task, it's a positive standardized beta. This means that as scores on the textism task increased, as did reading comprehension scores. And again, with the reading fluency task, as scores on the reading fluency task increased, as did scores on the reading comprehension task. Therefore, for the paragraph section of our reading comprehension task, reading fluency was the only significant predictor for reading comprehension. However, for the fill-in-the-blank section of the reading comprehension task, we had 3 significant predictors: number of texts sent per day, total number correct on the textism decoding task, and reading fluency as well. However, with these additional significant predictors for the fill-in-the-blank task, reading fluency was still the most significant predictor for both. We did have some limitations for this study. As you can all probably guess, it was the inconsistency of results between both reading comprehension tasks. We expected there to be a strong positive correlation, but however, there was a small positive correlation. The following researchers found the same thing with their study. They too found a low positive correlation with their reading comprehension tasks. They attributed this to the fact that reading comprehension is a very complex skill that requires multiple measures in order to capture all aspects of reading comprehension. Therefore, they suggested that for future research, if one wants to capture all aspects of reading comprehension, multiple measures of reading comprehension should be used because they are measuring different aspects of reading comprehension. We were able to make 2 conclusions from our results. The first conclusion is that it may not be specifically textism decoding that predicts reading comprehension, but rather decoding in general. And our second conclusion is that reading fluency is the strongest predictor for reading comprehension. Any questions?
Is there a correlation between number of texts sent a day and textism decoding? remember.
We should have brought our paper.
Yeah, we should have.
Dr. Wise, do you remember if there was a correlation between the two?
Between textism, decoding, and number of texts per day.
I think
Yeah.
all the significance
I'll get
is
back
on
to
the
you on
slide.
that.
It's interesting that their effects went in opposite directions.
Yeah.
And I wonder if they're related to each other. Like, is it the case that, I mean, from this, I would guess that the more texts you send a day, the worse you are at decoding, which would be really weird. But that's what this implies. So I just didn't know what the actual correlation between the two was. Yeah.
Were they not?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that that the reason that Texas and Utah wasn't a good behavior was because most of the Texas that we used for the research, like we didn't know, and it wasn't like related to what we actually used, like it was more related to the other kids.
So a generational thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that would change how the results. I think maybe if we had a list of textisms that our age group used, we might see that corresponding more with the text sent per day, because that might be addressing more the familiarity with the textisms, whereas the task we had now did have to rely more on decoding skills, which is why we got what we did, implying that, you know, if you had a good decoding score, your reading comprehension scores were good. So I think we would get different results, and that might be part of the reason that we got what we did.
So you had data on your participants' numbers of texts that they sent per day, correct?
Yes.
Did you have anything showing whether or not they used textisms? Because, like, I mean, I probably send just as many texts as the next person a day, but, like, I would never, you know, use, like, see you later or something like that, you know, like, type it out. Like, do you think that would affect it even, or?
I don't know. It would be something interesting to look at.
For the
We didn't
research.
examine that.
Yeah, we didn't ask a question.
All of us who did do this study in class, none of us knew most of those textisms, and we did discuss it a lot. All of us actually got heated about the discussion over textisms because we cannot stand when people use them, and we prefer perfect English when we're texting. Like, don't bother texting me if you're not going to spell out the word. And so because that was the majority of our research methods class, it might have been the majority for everybody that we studied, and in that sense, that probably swayed the results a bit.
Do you think the educational level of people in this study may have had an influence on that?
I definitely do, but our main thing was we wanted to address this kind of population, so I mean, I think it would be interesting to go see it in other populations, and the results would probably be different. Because, I mean, I don't imagine a lot of us use textisms, and we might know them, but I don't think many of us actually use them, just personally, especially from our research methods discussion class.
Thank you very much, Leah.
Yes, ma'am.
One more question.
More question.
Quick one, was there a gender difference?
We didn't
we
really
look at
examine
gender?
that.
We
I don't
didn't
even know if we
examine
had enough males in our sample
Yeah.
to even look at it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Which one do you use for?
Here, look, this is to go forward, backward, and then to point is the middle.
Okay. Our next speaker is Anthony Macaglia. He's going to be talking about the trait sympathy scale and prediction of helping behavior. And he has some co-authors who are listed in the book, but he's going to go solo today. Anthony?
As she mentioned, I'm Anthony Macaglia. This study on trait sympathy and prediction of helping behavior was actually done in the fall of 2012. It was first semester sophomore year. I'm a second semester junior now, so this was quite a while ago. But as with any psychological study, previous research on literature needs to be done to make sure you don't do a direct replication and see how you can extend on the previous work. And what we found is that sympathy is a multidimensional construct that includes feelings of sorrow and concern for others' well-being. Sympathy is also an important factor in the development of a pro-social disposition and has been found in a variety of altruistic and helping behaviors. However, while much research has been directed toward refining the theoretical construct of sympathy, comparatively less attention has been done on the development of a multidimensional measurement of trait sympathy. And in 2009, Lee developed the trait sympathy scale that measures trait sympathy on 3 different subcomponents: sympathy towards the disempowered, sympathy towards the feelings of others, and sympathy towards animals. And the purpose of the current study was to extend research on the construct validity of the trait sympathy scale by investigating its ability to predict people's emotional responses to a video depicting animal suffering and predict their willingness to engage in helping behavior during a stage accident. And I will get in more detail about the stage accident in the video later. And we came up with 4 predictions based on the previous research. And we predicted that women would report higher levels of trait sympathy than men, women would engage in more helping behavior than men during the stage accident. We also predicted that total scores on the trait sympathy scale and the sympathy for the animal subscale scores would predict concern for the dogs in the video, and the total scores on the trait sympathy scale would predict helping behavior during the staged accident. Participants were 53 students who all attended Oglethorpe. They were comprised of 37 women and 16 men with a mean age of 20.18 years and an average socioeconomic status of middle class. The racial distribution was 49% Caucasian, 26% African American, 14% Hispanic, and 11% other. The procedure, there were 2 different sessions. In the first session, participants were administered the trait sympathy scale and the demographic survey in a large group format. In the second session, which was conducted one week later, participants were scheduled for individual testing sessions. During the second session, participants were shown a 5-minute video clip from Phoenix Animal Cops, and depicted in this video was cops rescuing dogs who had been in an abusive environment. After the video clip, participants completed a survey measuring concern for the dogs portrayed in the video, and while they were completing the survey, the experimenter knocked over a cup of 10 pencils, and the way we measured helping behavior was how many pencils were picked up. Higher score on the survey meant more concern for the dogs, and the more number of pencils you picked up was more helping behavior. In the results, we had to measure the reliability of our scales, and with the trait sympathy score, the subscales, and the scale measuring concern for the dogs, the coefficient alphas were 0.81 and 0.87. That was the range, and that's pretty high, showing relatively good reliability. And we found that there were significant gender differences using point-by-serial correlations. Women reported significantly more general trait sympathy than men. Women reported greater sympathy for the disempowered. Women reported greater sympathy for the animals. Women reported more concern for the animals in the video. And women were more likely to pick up more pencils than men. And these findings were consistent with previous research. With predictive validity, the more general trait sympathy reported by the participants, the more concern they reported for the dogs in the video. However, interestingly enough, with the animal subscale, that did not predict concern for the animals, which is kind of weird if you think about it. And then the more general trait sympathy reported by the participants, the greater number of pencils they picked up to assist the experimenter. Discussion. As noted by Lee, sympathy is different than empathy. Empathy can occur for any emotion involving an understanding of another person's internal state and a shared affective experience, whereas sympathy only relates to the context of suffering. Previous self-report measures of sympathy have ranged from single-item ratings to adjective checklists, while ours looked at the multidimensional concept of sympathy. And the present study provided additional construct validity for the trait sympathy scale by demonstrating its ability to predict concern for animals in the context of an abusive situation and a pro-social helping behavior. We also replicated earlier research showing women tend to report more sympathy than men. Some limitations of the study: that there were only 53 people, so differences wouldn't be as large as in a large sample size. And we didn't look at sex of the experimenter because the nature of the project was a group project. We had, I think, 3 female experimenters, and I was the only male experimenter, just like in all of psychology. And perhaps participants would be more likely to help a female experimenter pick up the pencils rather than a male experimenter. You know, I can be mean sometimes. And implications. How does this affect the real world? Well, many occupations exist where compassion is an integral part of the workplace. For example, you need a group project. During the interview process, if you give out the sympathy scale and you can predict how much people will help, you can put together a pretty effective team group. These are some of the references, and thank you for your time. Open for questions.
Do you think there could possibly be an effect on if the experimenter insists that it's okay, just continue doing the test when they knock over the pencils? Because I would predict that, at least for me personally, my first instinct would be to help pick up some of the pencils, but I might pick up fewer if the experimenter insisted on me just keep taking the test.
Yeah, when we knocked over the pencils, we didn't instruct the participant either to help us or not help us. It was natural reaction. That's what we were trying to measure.
Were the pencil size knocked over at the same point within the
Yeah, we tried to
experiment?
make the experiment standardized, and everyone knock over the. We would knock it over as we handed them the survey.
Okay, two questions. One is, you said you had some surprising results because you didn't get the effect that you thought you would because of watching the video. Do you think the nature of your video could influence how you didn't get your effective?
Quite.
Because the video was that the police were rescuing dogs, right?
Correct.
Do you think if it was a depiction of actual animal violence, you might get a different result?
You think if it was more violent, perhaps they'd be more likely to help because the nature of the video is more suffering? Yeah, well, I mean, that'd be great to look at in previous research or future research.
My follow-up question is, Bubba Watson is currently tied to do you think that will hold on?
Well, my pick is Adam Scott, so I think he's going to be on top on Sunday.
As moderator, that is not a relevant question. Wait, I just have a follow-up. Is it possible that you have a ceiling effect going on with the animal sympathy thing? Like, was it disturbing enough that everyone, regardless of their general level of sympathy, was feeling really bad for those animals?
I actually never watched the video because I don't like animal violence, so it is quite possible that might have happened.
I mean, I've spoken to a lot of people who, you know, as soon as they hear the Sarah McLachlan song, they're like,
Change the channel,
I
yeah.
can't. And even people who don't normally have a high level of sympathy for animals, it would be interesting to look at your actual levels for that variable to see if everyone's just maxing out. Because if everyone's maxing out, you won't have a correlation. You know, you'll have a smaller correlation, and it might not predict.
Be a great thing to look at.
Do you think the participants' specific experience with animals growing up could have affected their sympathy toward them?
Absolutely, individual differences always has an effect on your results. Well, it was a video about dogs too, not cats.
Thank you very much. Okay, our last speaker is Jess Lill, and she's going to be talking about provocative dress and the gender effect, helping people.
All right, just like Anthony, I did this research over a year ago, but in my advanced experimental class, and I was really interested in social psychology and helping behavior. It's a really big topic, and a lot of the research I looked at were looking at kind of like almost arbitrary conditions that inspire people to help more, like attractiveness and age, things that you can't really change about yourself. And a lot of studies showed an effect called cross-gender helping, meaning men helped women more than they would help other men, and women helped men more than they would help other women. And I thought this was really fascinating, and why. And so some of the possible answers for this would be some gender-based goals. In one study, they looked at prepubescent children, And their goals at that time were always towards helping the same sex because of playmate aspirations. But after post-puberty, the age that I was looking at, goals tend to change in life, and we're much more interested in the opposite sex for a heteronormative world. So it might be possibly that men are helping women more, or women are helping men more because they're looking for a mate. Another study showed that women dressed in more feminine clothes receive more help from participants than in masculine dress, showing that there's like this dichotomy that women, again, are helped more by men because they seem more womanly. And so along these lines, you could assume that heterosexual men are helping women more because a provocatively dressed woman is perceived more as a romantically available person compared to a more conservative or masculine dressed female. But conversely, women who saw a provocatively dressed woman perceived her as more bitchy. That study looked at 3 different pictures of the same woman dressed in 2 different conditions. A provocative short skirt and tight blouse, the same woman in a conservative t-shirt and loose jeans, and then that woman in the provocative condition enhanced about 35 pounds digitally. Provocatively dressed woman was perceived more bitchy overall with no other information besides that picture. And so you could assume that just by looking at her, a woman's going to say, I'm not interested in helping this woman because I don't like her. So from this, I came up with these hypotheses. The first one is men are going to help a woman overall, more so than women, no matter what she's wearing. And the second one is that they're going to help a provocatively dressed woman more than a neutral or conservatively dressed woman. And the third addresses that last study, that women are going to help that neutral or conservative Confederate more than they're going to help this provocative woman because they see her as more bitchy, but still less than men. So to get these outfits, I tried on my entire wardrobe in different combinations, and you can see they're kind of dark, but there's a mix of style, color, and whatnot, and these are just a few examples of what I wore, and my classmates scaled them on a scale of 1 to 7, conservative to provocative, and we got some results. This was my provocative condition, and I don't know if you can see it, but it scored pretty high at a 6.98, so almost completely provocative on the scale. My neutral condition scored a 4.11, so just about the middle, and then conservative scored a 1.78, so just a little under 2 on the conservative scale. So I had 92 participants. I walked around one of Emory's larger libraries, going up 4 floors around the stairwell. And every 5 person I passed, I asked them, can you make change for $1? And while doing that, I recorded some information. During these interactions, I couldn't ask them, will you participate in my study? Because let's face it, they're all going to say they're going to help. So I had to secretly record how much time I was spending with them by counting in seconds. I was also paying attention to how much eye contact they were making with me. And when they hesitated, if they said sorry, if they offered any helping information like, oh, you can get change from the help desk, it's on the first floor. So all this time that they're trying to talk to me or I'm asking them a question, I'm recording all this information mentally and along with demographic information because then I had to pay attention to them. So these are the results of the actual help, the people that could produce change for $1. This isn't really what I was looking at because my question was very limiting. I was in a university library. A lot of students had backpacks, but not wallets or purses. Also, it's a school that runs on a digital Petro Pass-like system that has money preloaded for their library. So the helping behavior is very low. And also, surprisingly enough, contrary to my hypothesis, women produce more help. I think that can be explained for the fact that I know in my purse I have change rattling around, and the men that I know don't rattle change in their pockets. So there's a better chance that I could produce change for somebody who asked me than a man. Again, this wasn't what I was looking at. I was looking at eye contact and as a variable for willingness to help. And here I saw a main effect of men showing more eye contact with me as a person. That's these blue bars, as you see. They're much higher than the white female bars. That that just shows that men were more interested in helping me as a woman, and that correlates with the cross-gender helping. Also, there's a main effective condition. This, I don't know how to deal with it. Provocative, this bar. All participants were making more eye contact with me when I was in this provocative condition than I was with either neutral or conservative. But surprisingly enough, there's no interaction of gender or condition. But I also looked at time spent. So that was the time they spent talking to me, paying attention to me, possibly helping me or not. There was no main effect of gender. Again, that's really surprising considering my hypothesis. But there was a main effect of condition that overall participants spent more time with me when I was in this provocative condition than I was in a neutral or conservative one, which fits with my hypothesis. And there was an interaction this time. That men, this blue bar, the furthest blue bar, spent more time with me in this provocative condition than neutral or conservative, and women overall. So these results show that there's more support for cross-gender helping, and that type of dress affects this cross-gender helping. And some of my limitations are the variety of clothing that I had. I think it would be very interesting to look at an experiment that standardized a black tank top and shorts, a black t-shirt and capris, a black turtleneck and pants to get rid of the color, the style, the femininity compounds that could have happened that might signal more interest, because I like the way she's dressed, she's more my style, that kind of interest. Also, because I am a female, I was only looking at that one-way effect of cross-gender helping, and if I had a male confederate to also help participate that. And another limitation I had was the type of question that I asked. I asked a very limiting question on help, so I had to look at their perceived willingness to help, not their ability. So maybe if I asked a question more along the lines of, can you help me find my notebook that I left? Or if I asked that kind of question in a more social, money-oriented environment like a shopping mall, I could have received more of an accurate, actual help. So future studies could go that way. And it looked at participants, not their actual help, their willingness, their perceived willingness to be specific. So if studies looked better at the type of question that was asked or the location that it was asked, I think we would have a better accuracy of their actual helping behavior. That's pretty much it. Questions? Oliver.
You said you recorded like other demographics. Did any of those have any? Did you notice any effects with those?
I actually didn't go through. I recorded a lot of information, not just demographics and like behavioral cues. And when we're going through the statistics, we found so much on just those two that I ended up not looking at if race mattered or if age mattered. And I wanted to see, like, I recorded if people said sorry at all, like, oh, sorry, I can't help you. And I would love to see if that had an effect, but that's something I can go back, and I still have all the data and I can go back and check. But it would be interesting to see if age mattered or if race mattered, if a white man wanted to help me more than like all other races. Does that make sense? So it'd be interesting to look at. You.
Okay. Couple questions actually.
Okay.
First, in that one study in the introduction, what exactly was the operational definition of bitchy?
Bitchy? I don't remember the exact definition, but they considered her less friendly, and they were less interested in knowing her. They decided that she was, even though it was the same woman throughout the picture, and they had different control groups, and they had no other information, they decided the skinnier, provocatively dressed woman was more bitchy, less friendly, not as nice. Does that make sense?
That just seems like weird terminology to put into a peer-reviewed paper.
It was their terminology that's how they defined it. It was on a scale of bitchiness.
Also,
I think it accurately describes kind of the terminology of our generation language. And your second question?
Also, do you think it would be interesting to, well, useful to have research to see if there's another baseline for provocative versus conservatively dressed men and see if there's another difference for helping along those lines?
I would like to see the study done on the opposite and see men in this condition. I don't know how you would dress a man more provocatively. I'm not very male fashion oriented. But I would like to see some people could probably answer that for me, but I would like to see maybe doing some kind of reverse on that. Maybe I'll look into that. I don't know how to operationally define that unless, because most of my provocative was based on like skin showing, and men are permitted to show more skin without it being considered provocative than women. So it would have to be something I'd toy around with, but it would be interesting to see. There's another hand that went up.
Would sexual preference affect you at all?
I really do think so. I was assuming a very heteronormative world. And I don't know how I could necessarily gain that information unless I asked participants afterwards, what is your sexual preference? And those kind of demographics, and that would be an option that I could do, but I think that would lower the amount of participants I could get because I'd have to have their consent afterwards. So I would ask them, can you make a change for $1? Record all that information mentally, stop the interaction, be like, hey, you're a part of a psych study. Now, can you please tell me your age, your sexual orientation, and all of this stuff? Why didn't you help me? And then ask for their consent. So it would make the study a little trickier, but it could definitely be done. You.
I'm curious what your previous research on eye contact was and how much that actually predicted helping behavior and whether or not men are just prone to make more eye contact or like socially.
That's a really good question. A lot of the studies I looked at were looking at eye contact as a assessment of interest or like attention to the question, and so that's what I was basing that off of. I also didn't split eye contact, and I really wish I did, between eye contact of my face, which is socially normative, compared to eye contact of my body, which was dressed in the conditions. So that would be interesting to like break that down if I had, to see, are men paying attention more to my eyes because it's socially normative for them to shake a hand and look directly at you? Or are they paying more attention to the provocative or conservative outfit that I'm wearing? And all I can say is I think that would be a great way to split it up for future studies.
Just to follow up on that idea, is I know that if I see somebody with a provocative dress on, I purposely don't look below their neck. And
Yeah.
that is not helping behavior.
That's a social, you don't want to stare. Dr. Wise?
I think the first question has to do with demographics. How does your sample that you collected compare to previous research? Do you think there are any differences there that explain why it's done?
I don't think necessarily, like, I had a wide range of students, which is where most of these studies that I looked at previously were done in college campuses or shopping areas of around college campuses. So they're looking at the 18 to early 20s age. I was at Emory, so there was a higher percentage of Asian and white population than other demographics. But I do think the demographic portion is that I was in a library, which, contrary to popular belief, is not a social area. And so helping behavior and like interaction time might be affected more if I was in a park or a shopping area compared to a quiet, I'm going to class right now library. So I think that portion of the demographics, the people I was looking at in that location, might change if I was on a quad or in a shopping area nearby campus.
So going off of that, what you just said, since so much of it is sort of about that question of like, are they looking for a potential mate? Why did you choose such a neutral place as like a library instead of like a mall or a bar?
I actually went to 3 different locations, but had to drop 2 of them because of some incidents, and so I couldn't complete all of the conditions. So I had to stick with the library. I was also interested in seeing if the location would mix, but a library was a library that big with 4 different levels. There's high foot traffic, and also I went unnoticed as an experimenter. I feel like depending on what kind of park or what time of day, if I'm just coming up to people randomly, it's a little more suspicious. Same with kind of a shopping mall. I did went to Atlantic Station and do that, but it's much harder to do that in an open air where people are constantly passing you and wondering, why is that girl asking all the same questions over and over after she's received that help? So that would just have to be a trickier way to do it.
You said you walked up to every fifth person.
Mhm.
Did it matter if they had headphones in? Or?
I didn't mention that, but they couldn't have headphones.
I made sure that they weren't on a cell phone or like completely out of touch with the world, and they weren't in a group of people, because I didn't want to address one person in a group and I didn't want to address the whole group. So it was every fifth person that met those criteria of not having a cell phone in their hand, like talking or texting, not having headphones in, and not being in a group. So, Krista.
Do you think you would find similar results if instead of bearing your dress, you had Confederates and it was, an attractive person versus an unattractive person?
I looked at a lot of studies were focused on the attractiveness of Confederates, and I wanted to look at something even more arbitrary as like the type of dress. They found that attractive women or attractive Confederates, also attractive men, receive more help than less attractive people. And it's been done multiple times. And I wanted to look at something a little like more changeable, since I couldn't change me.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
That's it for us. Thank you all for coming, and I'm sure that the speakers would be happy to chat with you more about their research if you're interested. Have a great day. Don't forget my